Today I'm talking about something slightly different. I'm actually going to be speaking about a thing called tax liens. Who's heard of that? It's a way of buying US property. So, or getting into it, or into US property or investing. It's quite an exciting new thing, and it's something new that we're launching here at 21st Century early next year. So you're the first ones who are privileged to hear about this. So enjoy. What you'll find with this is it's a fantastic opportunity for people who here would love to sort of start and just earn some kind of passive income or some basic income but doesn't have a huge amount of capital. Put your hand up. Okay, this is probably perfect for you then, because it's going to be talking about that. And the great thing about tax liens is, as well as people who are just starting out, it can cater for anyone who just wants to get an income starting out at a reasonable rate of return, but it's relatively simple after putting in a bit of work, or who would like to basically be buying property and making profits basically from undervaluing of a property, getting in before everyone else does. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so I put here, it's helping you make a tax and money-making business while building a real estate portfolio starting with as little as $50. And in all seriousness, there are some tax liens you can buy, in fact, for as low as $20, and you can still get a return. I think that's pretty good. So starting out in the absolute basics. So it's a great way to graduate and start out. So who here is at your very first event, like first time? Quite a few of you. So if you're starting out and you've been a bit scared and overwhelmed, who's heard a lot of speakers, quite excited, but probably feels a little bit overwhelmed, goes, oh my gosh, where do I start? Anyone? Yeah, it's good to be honest. I mean, I went to my first wealth creation event like 11 years ago, and I was working as a lawyer and had a plush job in a major law firm in Melbourne. I had an office overlooking the river, highly regarded, and I woke up every day depressed and hating my job. Anyone ever feel that bad a bit? Yeah, I literally was. I had chronic health problems. I was in pain in my back all the time. I literally hated going to work, and I went to my first seminar, similar to this, in August 2000, so 11 and a bit years ago. And I caught the vision, got excited, and went away. And back then, didn't have... Of course, I was a bit overwhelmed, but I just knew from that day forward I did not want to be in the rat race anymore, and I wanted to start preparing to live my own life, because like I honestly told you on Friday night, I hate being told what to do. Who's like that? I hate it. Can't stand being told what to do. And the worst thing was being in the job was having someone basically telling me what to do. And I had constant arguments with my bosses in this big law firm. And I remember when I left and I resigned, admittedly I was a bit foolhardy. Me being me, I'm a bit of a risk taker at times. I just basically went up and after the seminar, so excited, pretty much left my job straight away, started the business cold. And pretty much came crashing down the first time, but learnt my lessons and got myself back up again. And from that, learned many various strategies. And the good thing with tax liens, it's a great way to open up to what I consider as a market that's got incredible opportunity. I mean, we've been completely focusing our own investment efforts in my own business now on the US and buying US property and looking into this kind of area because the prices and returns are incredible. Who was at the US property presentation yesterday? Yeah, there's some remarkable opportunities, isn't there? I don't know if we're going to get an opportunity like this in our lifetime. I'm just saying that. Who's seen property booms in the past and wished they were part of it but just never took action? Anyone? You know, I remember when I was like 20-odd, just starting out, like years and years ago, and my mum came to me and tried to get me to buy a property in an area called Brentwood in Western Australia for 35 grand. And at the time I said, oh, that means I've got to take out a mortgage. I'm just starting out on my job, Mum. I'd rather not do that. Let's wait for a while and I'll just buy a car for now. So, of course, I bought a car and never did it. Brentwood, within 15 years, that same house was over $500,000. So the long term, you do get wealthy, and by investing for the long term. Who's heard of a book called The Book of Wealth by John DeMartini? Or not by John DeMartini, but he promotes it quite heavily. Anyone? It's quite an amazing book. It was written and it kept as limited edition where only 400 families got access to it, and it teaches the principles of what made people millionaires and billionaires. It's got 1,000 pages, basically, of writing. Who thinks that would have some useful insights? Written by consultation with the billionaires and richest people of the world 100 years ago. But they kept it away from all of us, pretty much. And only in the last 5 years, due to the internet, it's managed now to get out into public circulation. But the basic thing they said was real estate, business is where you make your money. The rich 200 make it through real estate. In fact, you look at virtually all of the Rich 200 on the Rich 200 list, they make it from business with cash flow and in property and shares. So who thinks we need to invent the formula or just stick with what's tried and proven? What do you reckon? Stick with what works? Yeah. So the Book of Wealth was very clear on this kind of stuff and the long term. So investing in this kind of stuff and learning this kind of skills is what's going to get you started. Think of it a bit like if you're just right now in the job you hate, you want to break out of the rat race, think of it now as you've been in kindy and you're moving into first grade school. So in other words, it's time to learn some skills and start out small and build up. Okay, we've gone through that. I mentioned here former professional pianist. I actually spent 15 years, I used to play in hotels. On the Caribbean cruise earlier this year, I actually got up and played Billy Joel, Bryan Adams and a few others for my presentation. Who thinks that would have been sexy? It was great fun, I can tell you, and went down a bit of a treat. If I had a piano here today, I would sing you a love opera or something like that. Okay, disclaimer, look, one of these things we have to say, basically for education purposes, don't go out and think you're now a financial planner after this, and it's basically to educate you to get you started. So, I've mentioned here that net 18 to 36% per annum cash flow. Now, to be frank, that's actually understating it. You can get a lot more than that depending on how things work. But I'm just stating that to get started. Okay, so who is this apply to? If you're basically wanting a cash flow business of some kind, just can generate your basic income. So number one, who here is looking for some kind of cash flow business? Okay. Who here would be interested just to learn, rather than relying on fund managers, how you can invest your super a little bit better than maybe you are now? Who's interested in that? And your cash? Yep. This can just give you a bit more insight into how to do that. And who's interested in actually buying US properties and getting a bit more involved to get them for a bargain? Okay. So this is for this. So that's right from the basics right up to a bit more elite, where you're willing to put some hard yakka in and do this. Okay. My why I spoke about on Friday night, which is very much about making a difference in society and helping people basically be liberated, get their freedom from the system. A lot of you know I spoke about my hatred of speeding and parking fines and how I've got out of 12 of them in the last 2 years, how I take on pretty much all kinds of things. I've helped get rid of stalkers for friends, bullies for friends, all that kind of stuff. Who thinks that's pretty cool? Just for simple legal techniques. And one of the things I'm really about is making a difference, and one of the things we're going to be doing in this course as well is offering people an opportunity to use it for humanitarian type of purposes. In other words, how you can make a profit, make a very good return, but help our fellow Americans who are going through a hard time. Who thinks that's pretty good? Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. End of our life, it's a difference we've made. For me, wealth and money is to enjoy life, but also to make a difference to others. I've mentioned this already, the BRW 200, the best kept secret of the Rich 200, doing it through business, through real estate and through shares. Basically, with tax liens, it enables the little guy now to compete with the big guy and basically win. A bit like the David and Goliath. So whereas up until now, the banks and attorneys and everybody else, they pretty much have a monopoly, although they still, to a large degree, in this kind of area here, pretty much it's a bit more even playing field for you to get in there and basically start making income from it. And I put here another step towards freedom and basically getting away from your job. And I spoke to you before about that and how I made my break from the rat race. Who here is really serious about making their break from the rat race? Again, this can be another engine to your strategy. And I regard cash opportunities like this. You want to have multiple streams of income. And relying on any one thing is risky. Relying on a job is the riskiest thing you can do. Who would agree with that? Whereas, again, the more education you've got, it doesn't matter what the economy is like. It doesn't matter if there's a global financial crisis or whatever, you can still basically make an income and find ways through it, as we're finding out right now in the US property market. Okay, so let's have a look at tax liens and find out a bit more about what they are. Okay, the word lien, this is a lawyer in me speaking now, actually means tied up. I'm not being rude here. It's an encumbrance on an owner's property to secure a debt. So it's similar to a mortgage, but not quite. It attaches over a property. So the reason tax liens exist is counties in the US, they use them to basically secure a property. So Let's just say, for example, that I fail to pay my taxes. So I live in, say, Illinois or Kentucky. I haven't paid my taxes. What happens is rather than foreclose on me, many counties offer this tax lien program. So they put a tax lien over the property, which means that the property can't be sold until they've been paid their taxes. Then what happens is once the owner pays back the taxes and any interest and penalties, the lien gets lifted and the property is owned outright by the owner again. Does that make sense? So in simple terms, a lien just means, a lien is like, let's just say that you take your car to the mechanics and you get it fixed, and you come back and you won't pay the mechanic can hold your car in his garage on a lien, which means until you pay him. It's a similar type of concept. So owners generally, depending on the state, and what you understand with US is there's 52 odd states or whatever, and the rules are very different in every state. So depending on the state, the owners get 1 to 5 years to pay, and they get what's called a right of redemption. So that means that once the tax lien is done, some states it's just a straight 5 years, some it's like a 1 year rolling lien, which means they give a 1 year lien, and then they give a first right of refusal to the lien holder. So, e.g., let's just say that it's my house that's up for grabs here by the taxing authority, and let's just say that, let's take someone in front row. What's your name? Michael. Let's just say that Michael has actually got a tax lien, so he's bought one, and I'll go through the buying process in a minute. He gets a right of first refusal, so if after a year the county decides to extend and give me another year to pay my taxes, then Michael gets first right to it. So let's just start to create the link now. So at the moment we've established how counties actually give you this 1 to 5 year time to pay your taxes. So how does that mean you can make money, and how does that impact you? Because the county is effectively loaning money to the owners to pay their tax. And just to quickly, before I go on, tax deeds is the other way of doing it. So not all counties do a tax lien. Some do a tax deed, which means, let's say in Kansas, for example, they don't do tax liens. Kansas do tax deeds, whereas Arizona, which we've heard about this weekend, does do tax liens. So with Kansas, who don't do it, they do a tax deed, which means if you don't pay, they foreclose on the property, and then you can go and buy the property at an auction. So I'll go through a little bit more about tax deeds a bit later on. Let's just have a look now a bit more about these tax liens. Now, what some states and counties do is they sell the liens to private investors like you and I. And again, not all states do this, but some of the states actually do these tax liens and sell them to the general public. And why would they do that? That sounds a bit weird, I know, but why would they do that? Anyone here been in business and heard of debt factoring? Or invoice factoring? Okay. What a lot of businesses do, and is companies that offer this service. Let's just say that in my accounting business, I've got a lot of people owing me money. And let's just say I want to get my cash flow more stable. What I might do is sell my debts off to what's called a factor or a debt factor. The debt factor company takes my debts. So let's just say that I've got, let's make up a figure here. Let's just say I've got about 50 grand owing that I want to collect, and I need that money now or pretty close to it. I can sell my debts to a factor. Now, the factor might charge me a premium or whatever else, and might charge me, say, $40,000. I'll charge them. They'll pay me 40 grand straight into my bank account immediately, and then they get the rights at law to collect the $50,000. Does that make sense? And that way, I get cash flow. Now, counties, as we tend to know, governments aren't always the best managed entities, are they? Governments tend to be a little bit mismanaged and always seem to be short of money. And the counties of the US are no different. So many counties who are very cash-strapped, what they do is they sell the right to this debt to get cash flow immediately. And they basically give up the interest and the premiums to do it. Think of it a bit like options. Who's been to the options trading and learned about covered calls and trading this weekend? Okay, who hasn't? Okay, virtually most of you. Okay, so the options trading, you may remember, but you can do a few things with options trading. Like, for example, you can buy an option for, say, $5,000, say a call option, and then the stock price soars, goes through the roof, and so you basically then sell the option and make, say, $9,000 and you make a $4 grand profit. That's obviously risky because if it goes against you, you lose your option. So who remembers a covered call strategy, like Sharelord and and the other ones, where you basically write the option. Now, it's much less gains, but your risk is much less. So what they do is, for more certainty, is they write an option over those shares. Let's say over $5,000 of shares. Let's say they get, I don't know, $500 or whatever. If the stock price soars, the option will be exercised and you'll only still make $500 plus a little bit on the capital gain if you're writing it out of the money. But nevertheless, you're much less risk. Likewise, what you're doing with tax liens is that the government's doing the same thing. They're selling the tax lien to you to basically lower their risk. So this way, let's just say a county is owed, let's make up a figure, $100 million of taxes, or $100 million, which haven't been paid. Let's just make up that figure. Now that money could be very useful in their hands. So what they might do is, that $100 million may be comprised of $70 million and $30 million of penalties, or let's say 75 and 25. So what they do is they say, look, we just want to get the money in our hands. So they then sell to get the $75 million at auction, plus a premium. So, and depending on the state, depends on what they do. They bid on the premium in some states, they bid on the interest rate, bid it down, whatever, and I'll cover that a bit more shortly. But to cut a long story short, the county might walk away with $80 million in their account. The investor gets the right to that $25 million. And potentially, the investor might also walk away with the property because the investor also gets the right to foreclose on the property if the tax isn't paid. And usually at a great, much bigger, a major undervalue. Major, like in extreme cases as low as 5–10% of the value. So, everyone following me so far? Okay, let's keep moving on the slides. So you basically, with a tax lien certificate, you now own the loan and you're entitled to the interest and penalties. And that tax is secured by the owner's property. So effectively, you're becoming a secured lender. That's what you're doing. So you're getting not only a loan, but it's not like pawnbroking where you might get 40% interest but you got no security. You're getting a percentage return and you also got some security over the property. Sounding pretty good so far? It is. It's quite remarkable. So I've mentioned about the counties use it as cash straps and debt factoring, usual commercial practice. So if you go online and look at debt factoring, you'll find it's very, very normal, what I'm telling you about. There's companies sell off debts all the time to stabilise their cash flow. So that's what the counties are doing. They're selling off the debts and they're opening up to the public. So the features are the right to the taxes, the high return up to 36%. I didn't mention there the security of the property, but I mentioned it before. The right of redemption, which means that the owner gets the right to redeem the property, and what's called the right of first refusal. The right of first refusal, just to mention that one again, means you as a lien, let's say you bought a tax lien at an auction, then you get the right of first refusal. So if the county's lien runs out and you're going to foreclose and decide to give the guy more time to pay his money, you get the first right to get the lien and keep getting cash flow from that lien. Now, what are the benefits of a tax lien certificate? I mentioned here up to 36% interest. In saying that, again, it could even be more. And I'll show you an example a bit later on as to how it can be actually end up being more in some states. In an extreme case, it may even be like very, very high. And in a very, very extreme case, it can be as high as 300%. Now, to be clear, that is a very extreme case. That would be like where there's an early redemption of the lien. To explain what I mean by that, let's just say in some states, the interest and penalties is not like daily rate compounded, it's just a set amount. For example, in Illinois, it's 18% every 6 months. So let's just say that you have the tax lien. Let's just say that 2 weeks later, the guy actually pays up what's owed. You're still going to get your 18%. That means you made 18% for 2 weeks. Now, annualised, how much is that? It comes to about 350% or something. Do you see what I'm saying? So potentially, returns can be like that high, but I stress that is not the norm. That's just, in fact, you get that, it's fortuitous, it's great fortune, it's a bit like you buy an option and it happens to just go through the roof and you just bought it at the right time. Okay, VIP treatment, all priorities of the banks. The great thing about tax liens is that you get priority over the banks in most situations. I stress most, not all, but in most situations you get priority. So if the money has to be divided up, something goes wrong, then basically you get priority. The government collects for you, which is the great thing. So you've basically got your own debt collection or factoring type of business for potential property, and you're borrowing that money, and the government just collects it for you and pays you. So it's really just like having a certificate of deposit. So going down to a bank or to a private lending, and you just lend the money and you've got a certificate, you're getting paid interest like a bond. The difference is you're lending to these kind of people, so who basically can't pay their taxes. As I mentioned, you may, in an extreme case, be able to buy a property at 5 to 10% of market value and the comfort of your own home, which means that many states now are doing online auctions, which means rather than having to go into the US and buy, they actually do the auction online, so you can just go online and basically just bid and buy. And as well as online auctions, you can do what's called leftover buying, which means that if there's properties that are left over from auctions, they can be made available. Just some of the states that do it here, I've mentioned. You've got Alabama, you've got Arizona, I've mentioned here. Missouri, Illinois, particularly good ones. New Jersey, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South... So quite a few. Kansas and Atlanta, unfortunately, are not in there. So I mentioned here about the payments method. Some states are fixed penalty, some do annualised interest. So far we've talked about these tax liens and how they work. Now, bidding down the interest, bidding on the premium over the taxes. So in other words, there's different ways for the auction to basically pay for the lien. So in simple terms, let's just show you very simply how this works. Let's just say that you buy a tax lien for $10,000. There's a few ways it could do. One way is just a premium. So they open up for bidding. Someone says, I'll pay $100. Someone says, I'll pay $110. I'll pay $115. And they might settle on a $120 premium. So usually, depending on the quality of the property or depending on the premium that is actually paid. Another way is, like in Florida, for example, is they bid down the interest. So let's just say that a lien certificate is offering, say, 18% per annum. They might say, OK, who's willing to accept 17%? Who'll do 16? Who'll do 15? Who'll do 14? And let's just say we get 14%. That means the county keeps the 4% profit. And they basically pay you 14%. So think of it like the county's outsourcing. They're outsourcing to you. There are extreme cases with incredibly good quality properties where the county might just have you might only end up getting 2% or 4%. But that's rare. You all following so far? Okay. So what do you need to do tax lien investing? Well, you've got to be a US resident, but in saying that doesn't mean you have to go to US and become one. The good news is you set up an LLC. We spoke about US property yesterday. The LLC gets the physical address, and that means that you can receive correspondence. You've got a tax ID number you'll need, an employee identification number, and very importantly, I put here a clear strategy. Now, why do I put that in there? Because you've got to know why you're doing it. Are you doing it more for the property, or are you doing it more for the return? Because it's a huge difference as to how you go about tax liens depending on why you're doing it. And you can get some very good quality tax liens, for example, for $10,000, $20,000 it might cost for the lien, and you'll get a very good return on some of those, and you might end up also, as I mentioned, getting the underlying property. So a clear strategy, really important. And just on that one, can I mention that when you go away from this weekend, you want to take action and develop a plan or strategy and start at the basics. Start small if you're just starting out and just do something. Get something, do something, and start applying it. Otherwise, you'll have a very great experience and great learning, but nothing will actually happen in your life. They've actually shown from statistics that on average at a seminar, only 5% of people take action and actually make a difference in their life. Who thinks that's pretty scary? 5%. So on that basis, there's only going to be a few. So who thinks it would be a good idea to break that trend here? So take action, actually apply this knowledge and do something about it. So as I mentioned, tax liens are a great way to get started, understand the property market, which is pretty much 90% of millionaires or more have in some way had property as part of making their money, 90%. And I think we all agree the Australian property market, although obviously there's still good buys right now, the prices are pretty high and quite prohibitive for many people. Whereas US property definitely is less prohibitive, and there's some good ways, and the tax liens makes it even more accessible. Okay, so that's tax liens. So in simple terms, I've explained what a tax lien is. Basically, the county buys the tax lien, or they create a tax lien because someone hasn't paid their tax. You, as an investor, then basically buy the lien at an auction or leftover or otherwise. You then basically collect, you are entitled to collect the interest and penalties on that lien, and in a good case, you might get the underlying property. Returns can be as high as I said, in extreme case, 300%, but certainly anything from 16 to 36% is not uncommon on a tax lien. And I think we all agree that's a little bit better than you're getting in a managed fund right now. Agree? Yeah, so a very good way to educate yourself. And the whole academy here is about that. It's really about saying, look, why passively rely on fund managers who make you 5% when the market's going up, but then when they lose 40% when it goes down, then blame the market crash, and suddenly all your gains of the last 8 years are wiped out. Who's had that experience already? Yeah. So really, you're now starting to do your own due diligence and take control. That's why self-managed super is such a great thing for you to do if you can do it, because you take control of your retirement. And I do stress self-managed means you manage it. It doesn't mean you just passively sit there and hope it goes up. So who here is committed to managing and basically building their wealth from this point onwards? Put your hand up. Great. So this is the kind of knowledge you want here. I just want to touch briefly on tax liens versus tax deeds and what the difference is. In terms of what's better, it entirely depends on what you want and what you're doing and why you're actually doing this for. If you're doing it for a cash flow business or to investing for the returns, and you're less concerned about the property, then tax liens is the way for you to go. I mentioned here that many states still do physical auctions. It's not essential. You can now do the online auctions, and I've mentioned quite a few of them that actually are doing them. So tax liens, I've got leftover sales here. As a good example, Illinois, last year, 90,000 tax liens up for sale. Who thinks that's a lot? In fact, they went for days, the auction, they couldn't finish it, so 44,000 were left over for people just to go and basically bid. So in other words, you don't need to fly to US and buy them. You can basically buy them, there's plenty available, and there's certainly, like anything, there's always going to be some good ones if you know what you're doing and you've got the knowledge. And like anything, the people with the knowledge are the ones who will stay ahead of the game. That's why, to be honest with you, the global financial crisis has not really bothered me all that much. I had my moments with it, but all I did was, rather than complain about it, I reinvented my strategy. Found new ways in terms of my business, new ways in terms of investing. Because there may be a crash in many countries, but there's always going to be places where it's going to be working. Why? Because wealth doesn't disappear. It just changes hands. So when we do a tax lien, when the investment return is more important than owning the property, if you want a low capital, so if you're in this room today and you're saying, look, I don't have a lot of money, Warren, I just want to start basic, a tax lien is a great way, as I said, to get started at relatively low capital and get into the property market with some kind of security and at least getting some understanding about it. I put cheekily wanting a 4-hour work week. Who's read the book by Tim Ferriss, The 4-Hour Work Week? Great book, well worth reading. Talking about managing your time better. And again, let me stress this, I'm not someone who likes to get up and just promise something which is not the case. It is possible to run this as an exclusive business, no doubt about it, but like anything, to make anything a business, you've got to put time and effort into it. But certainly to make this an income-producing business for you, that's producing a good income for you, very, very much, very, very possible, and a great starting point. So, and yes, there are people making some phenomenal returns from this right now who are virtually doing it full-time. So, or you want property at significantly under, market value, and you're a bit of more of a risk taker in terms of that one. In other words, a tax lien is that you're either more of a risk taker in that you're not, you just want to buy them, and if the property comes there, or do due diligence. Either way, it's your choice. When would you buy tax deeds? You buy tax deeds when you really are more focused on the property. Now, in saying that does not mean you can't get tax liens, because tax liens have some incredibly good value properties, even better still, than many of the tax deeds. However, tax deeds are specifically focused on the property, not on the return or anything else. So you'd be more in the tax deeds if capital growth is your main focus and cash flow is just a side benefit. And the other good thing about tax deeds is you don't have to, is that the foreclosing is done for you by the county. Whereas if you've got a tax lien and you decide to foreclose, you've got to have a bit more involvement in that process. Whereas with a tax deed, they do it all for you. Okay, what risks are there? Well, the short answer is there certainly are risks with it, like anything. So let's just have a look at them. One big one is if the owner actually goes bankrupt, you can lose your entire investment. So let's say you take a tax lien, the owner goes bankrupt, you actually don't get priority in bankruptcy. So that will mean in a bankruptcy, you could lose your whole investment. Now, is that a common scenario? In actual fact, from what I found on research, only about 3% of them that actually happens in practice. We actually end up making a loss for that. So it comes down to managing statistics. Just like options trading, you're going to have moments of losses. And like I trade options and do what's called John Thompson's put strategy. And we know that 20% of our trades are going to lose money. We just know that. But what we do is we manage our losses to make sure that they're small and make sure that our gains are large. Understand what I'm saying? Make sense? Yeah. Likewise with this, you've got to have losses in a tax liens thing. That's going to happen. And if you're someone who just, what I call, throws a dice and buys without proper research or understanding what you're doing, just like doing any kind of trading or anything, the same thing's going to happen. You've got to put some time into mastering it. But like riding a bike, the better you get at it, the less time you spend. And you'll come to a point where you just don't need to spend as much time. I mean, with me, for example, once upon a time when I was presenting on accounting, on tax, on business, I would be taking 5 to 10 hours to prepare. It don't take anywhere near that long these days because I've got the system, I've got the structure. With trading right now, I mean, originally Derek and I were putting a lot of time because we were doing it together. Now, these days, it's less and less time because we're understanding it more and more. So, likewise, the more you understand this, the better you'll become at it, and the more you can manage your risks. And like I mentioned here, there are risks, it's managing them and making sure your budget allows for them. I like what David Lockman says, who teaches on e-minis. David just says he just regards losses as a business expense. It's part of his cost of doing business. You can lose out due to early redemption. So in some states, if the owner redeems early, you're out of pocket. So let's say that it's not a fixed penalty state, it's an annualised interest. If the owner redeems after, say, 2 weeks and you're only getting, say, 20% per annum, well, you're probably going to end up out of pocket. So that is always a risk. So again, you can manage that by choosing your states to which one you go into, again, depending on your strategy. Foreclosure can be expensive and time-consuming, and the property may have repairs and not be as good as you thought. Probably a big one here is if you're buying the tax lien because you like the property, then you want to make sure that you do due diligence because people who are about to lose their homes often can do silly things, and including trash the property and damage it. So if you're buying the tax lien more for the property, you probably need to do some due diligence as to the state of the property at this current time. And I've already mentioned, like anything, you have to put effort to make it work. And to be honest, if you really just want to make money and do no work, then see a financial planner and invest in a mutual fund and get 6% per annum. Okay? I'm serious. If you want to make money and do absolutely nothing, then that's what I recommend you do. If you're willing to put some time in and learn this, you can definitely get far greater returns. And I say the more smarter you get, the more work you're willing to put into it, the more reward you're going to get. Anyone relate to that? Yep, so it's putting the time into it. Let's give a couple of examples here. So you purchase a tax lien certificate for $1,000, 18% yield and $100 premium. So the buyer redeems after 2 months. Now, the 18% yield, I'll just mention, is actually over 6 months. That's in Illinois. So I'm assuming in this example it's Illinois. So you make $1,180, which is obviously $1,000 plus 18%, which is $180. $1,180. You less the $100 premium, $80 profit, 8% in 2 months equates to 48% per annum. Who thinks it's a good return? It's a good return, isn't it? Imagine if the buyer pays tax after 8 months. So let's just say that after 6 months, the lien rolls over. In Illinois, it rolls over every 6 months. You get $1,360, that's $100, $1,260, $260 in 8 months equates to 39% per annum. Again, pretty good return. So obviously, in many cases, when you're actually buying a lien, the good thing about it, for those who've got more of a conscience, you're actually wanting the person to pay their tax back quickly because you'll actually make a better return. Here's an extreme example, obviously, but an example of where a tax lien went off extremely well. The lady purchased lien for $1,200 on a Missouri property. She repossessed after a year. Total costs were $2,000, including legals. The property value was actually $50,000, and her cash flow now is $6,000 per annum. Is that pretty good? Yeah, so she's basically, for $2,000, got a property worth $50,000, but getting $6,000 a year passive income. And those opportunities do exist. So, in summary, we've looked at tax liens and we've seen it's definitely a great opportunity to make money. No two ways about it. It's an opportunity to get in there, to buy these tax lien certificates, to basically help people pay their taxes, help the counties raise their revenue, and at the same time, you're getting yourself an income and, in some cases, able to buy the underlying property.